Hello, everyone. My name is Trish McCabe. Welcome to Conversations from the School of Hard Knocks. Today, I have my guest, Pasha Paroh, here to join me again. Yay. Today, we're going to talk about the power of words, which we've kind of been doing this throughout all of our podcasts. It keeps coming back to words. And since you're an etymologist, I'm so excited to have this conversation because that's what you're all about in a lot of ways. I gather, I
I,
feel, anyways.
Trish, thanks for having me on again. I appreciate the title there, etymologist. I've never been called such, but it sounded so good. um, yeah, we just do a lot of studying and researching, and a lot of our content that we've done, you and me, over the last several weeks has been centered around the power of words. And you had a great idea to let's just talk about the power of words in general.
Yes, I wanted to open up with that list that you and I had talked about that I've been kind of putting together. And I'm going to read them because I think they're just really powerful. And then we can go from there, whichever one you get to pick of these, whatever. We'll just take it as we go along here.
Okay.
Misnomer blanket statements that are incomplete and allow gaslighting and abuse. And this is where the power of words, the way you put words together, not just the meaning of the words themselves, but like when we speak them, it's like that power of suggestion thing that comes to my mind. So anyways, the big ones at the top here is life isn't fair. Nice guys finish last. Pride cometh before the fall. Don't let it bother you. It's a dog eat dog world. All guys are dogs. um, there's a lot more. I don't think I need to go through all of them, but there's a few there that I think are really big. And like life isn't fair is a big one, I think. And like things like nice guys finish last, or it's a dog eat dog world. And just, I guess, it gets frustrating because when people say these statements, I'm like, that's not entirely true. When you have a blanket statement, the words can be very easily misconstrued and sort of make something mean something it doesn't actually really mean. Anyways, I'll let you take it from there.
Right. You're absolutely right, Trish. And I think what happens, how do I want to say it? Like, I think what happens is what we have to consider is this: people have their own meaning of words nowadays
Yes.
that may be influenced by the people around them, that's general common knowledge, so to speak, all kinds of stuff. Now, what that does is one of my first videos on the YNet 7 channel was talking about how many, basically posed the question, how many languages are there? And, people be like, oh, 100, 200, you know what I mean? But you have almost 8 billion people on the planet. So theoretically, you could potentially have 8 billion different languages because everybody's speaking their own version, right? To begin with. So starting right there, we have to understand that the power of words lies is bipolar.
It's bipolar. Oh my God,
the sender and the receiver. You know what I mean? And
right. Okay.
so,
yeah, someone may say it, but it may mean something to another person. This is where, these things get muddied. Like I see, and I've talked about this, people use the word toxic. But if you just say toxic people, what is that? That word is not specific enough. We know it's not a good thing when they say toxic, but what it does is it allows somebody to attach to that word whatever they think isn't good. And I think, it would be more helpful if they would say abusive or harmful, which is more descriptive of what you mean by toxic. I'm using this one as a particular example because it's one that I see a lot, or where it leaves it open for interpretation.
Mhm.
And then you're not really talking about the behavior that's quote unquote toxic.
Right.
And I just
So
want to move in the direction of talking about the behavior. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
no. Moving in direct, excuse me, moving in the direction of the behaviors. So, I grabbed a book. I always thought
Okay.
my cover them fell off. I need to tape this up. But so the word toxic, because I heard you pose that same question before. So let's go to the authority, right? Because the word authority is the book or the quote. And toxic actually comes from, it's an adjective back from like 1664, and it comes from toxicus, Latin, which was poisoned.
Okay.
So
Right.
now if you're looking at poison behavior, it's if we say poison instead of toxic, who you are, you have your certain behavior pattern, and then anything that's toxic would be poisoning to that.
Yes. Yes. And so in that part, and toxic isn't as bad as maybe some other words, but I think it ties in with what you were saying is people will, if there's not enough clarity in the word like that, they will attach whatever they think toxic is.
Yes.
And that's the part that I get frustrated with, because please explain what when you're saying a toxic person. That's now you're kind of getting into where you're putting people kind of in a box, and that gets really dangerous because now it's become a label that doesn't have any clarity. And because there's no clarity, it can be really harmful. People can do different things with it, and put you in that box. Well, you're just toxic, instead of having the whole complete conversation of what was that behavior that that person was adhering to in that situation. We really need to move in that direction of the actual situation. It's like, I would love to put together a chart of what does toxic behaviors look like. It would help a lot, because there's just a lot under that umbrella. And again, it gets muddied, and we go back to what we were talking about before, were labels. This is where labels become dangerous because of interpretation.
Yeah.
People's meaning of a word, what they think it means, or what it means to them. And they'll think they'll think the person that said toxic is saying the same thing, and they're not. And then you got this confusion, disconnect.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I totally agree. And this is why I always recommend etymology to people in conversation and passing and opportunities like this, because it's like the standard, you know what I mean? It's the truth, one. But once we all accept the truth, now we can communicate with each other without that interference. Because the thing is, it's all based on perception, right? So it is, let me slide my mic over here a little bit. So it's all based on perception. So when we send the word out, we're broadcasting a signal, right? It's received by the person or persons or people that we're looking to communicate or connect with. Now, once it gets there, like you're talking about, they have their own opportunity to register what it is that we are trying to say. So that means that the words have power to create pictures and shape, and the pictures perceived by the people we're talking to help shape their belief. So if someone was saying negative things about you, and then to the person they were introducing you to, right, or that they were bringing to around you, that person is going to have that in their mind before they even meet you. So it's going to shape their perspective.
Yes.
For example.
Yes.
So, but as far as toxic goes, let me speak on that for a moment. Because the reality is that we're going back to perception, which is why I started there. So basically, toxicity is determined by the perception, but then you can grow it into a group or organization. So you could be coming with innovative ideas, right? And they'll say you're toxic. You could be what's another thing? On this side of the coin, it's like this company is disruptive and it's breaking into new uncharted territories, and it's a great thing, right? But over here, that same word, you're being disruptive, is bad. You know what I mean? So
duality. We go back to that duality thing again. That's you can use it. I was just thinking about that. In fact, God, we're so in sync. It's like I put this here as it ties in what you're saying. To have expectations / standards is not the same as being attached to an expectation, having an expectation. So yeah, again, if they're not used properly, again, it's, especially if a word has more than one meaning, can be really can create a lot of confusion. Hence, here we are. We have a very confused world.
Yes.
Because our language is so, the English language in particular can be very challenging for people to learn because there are various words that have several meanings. So, and that's in other languages as well. But so it's a powerful thing when there isn't clarity, when you're using a word, because words are so powerful. And if we're not mindful of how we're using them, we can be misunderstood or put something out there we're not even intending to. And then there's the intent part. So anyways,
well, you brought up, you good. You brought up, I just want to add this to what you're saying, because you brought up a great point there about you could be misunderstood. And I want to speak to you and everybody else that has the same frustration that sometimes it's not that you're not using the words right. It's not that you didn't have the right intent. It's not that you did anything wrong. It's on the receiver's end. So you could be in totally good standing, so to speak, with your translations, right? And still go through the same problems and still have the disconnects because the perception of the receiver is off for whatever reason.
And part of that comes down to that word means something different to that person. They have a different experience with it. So that's really, really, really powerful. I just would like to move more in the direction of clarity. And I know we're on the same page. That's why you do your etymology, because you want to really understand what the actual meaning of that word is. And the context in which people use words. But then there's also the element, I don't know how much we want to talk about this factor in the power of words. There's also the factor of just these statements, they have a lot of power when you say the power of suggestion, I guess is what I'm getting at. When something they'll say, life isn't fair. What is that suggesting? I don't like that, because then what happens is, well, I'm just going to do this because, life isn't fair anyways. So, what I mean? It invites bad behavior, and it's actually not entirely true. That's the thing, is these way they put these words in the sentences suggest something. We have to really be mindful of what it's suggesting. Because if you put a statement out there like life isn't fair, what is that going to promote? What is, how are people going to respond to that idea, that suggestion?
Yeah. Well, there's two definitions for the word fair, right? And we got it as a noun, and we got it as an adjective. So fair as an adjective is probably before 1200. It says pleasing to the eye, beautiful. So that was like the original adjective. It came from pleasant and Old English, meaning pleasant, probably before 900, and then it comes into the future. So the second version of fair was about 1250, which was gathering to buy and sell and to exhibit animals, articles of produce.
Like
So that
going
would,
to the fair.
yeah, yeah.
Right.
So
Hmm.
life, if we just examine that quote for a moment, life isn't pleasing to the, well, is an adjective. It is saying it isn't pleasing to the eye or beautiful, which we know beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and that's where we go back to the reception of the energy received, right? And if you were using it as a noun, it's like life isn't a gathering to buy and sell and exhibit. It says animals, but you could think about anything because it says articles of
Circus.
produce.
Yeah.
Yeah. So articles of produce is really everything that can be produced, a product, which now you're getting into that gray area between that statement and the fact that all the world is a stage. So on one side, it's like it could be perceived as accurate to some people. Yeah, man, life is hard, it's gritty, it's grimy, and you know what I mean? So that would fit that. Then you got on
Yeah.
the other side, life isn't fair, which it's not a product, but then again, at the same time, it is. So
Hmm.
here's one of them things where you're saying, depending on who's saying it and who's receiving it.
What I get frustrated about, is the power of word, the power of words and how you say them and what you suggest. And to say life isn't fair is suggesting that entirely. And it's not actually true all the time. There are aspects to life that one would perceive as not fair, but it doesn't, it's incomplete, because if you put that statement on the table, why would you say that? And then you're really digging in and getting, having more of the real conversation in terms of whether life is fair or not. Because like I said, if someone is told that a lot when they're growing up, life isn't fair, what is that going to promote in that person? It's going to make them go, well, life isn't fair, so no holds bar, I can do what I want,
Right.
whether it's harmful or not, because life isn't fair. It's like, or it can make somebody feel really depressed, like life isn't fair. It's like you said, it's messed up, and so why even bother? It isn't a good blanket statement, because it doesn't cover every scenario, and I don't like that. But it has been a very powerful statement that I've heard my whole entire life, that doesn't perpetuate a lot of goodness. It's not a good mindset to be in. Life isn't fair. It's just not. How is that going to produce encouragement and
the product,
empowerment and the ability to have a good life? If life isn't fair, you're kind of like doomed right out of the gate if you're going to really believe in that statement. And and it's a powerful thing to put out there. It manifests things that aren't good, and more on the not good side than good. I can't even see how that statement would prompt people to feel good even. If life isn't fair and you believe that and you take that into your spirit, how is it going to affect your actions? How is it going to affect your mood and your outlook on life?
Yeah, I think you summed it up with the on the negativity that's translated through that. I think that's definitely going to be opportunity for depression and just a whole bunch of stuff. And then we have the combined factor. Now, I look at it as a neutralizing agent. It neutralizes both negativity and positivity. It's a neutralizer. Now, look at this, right? So phonetics comes into play now. When you're saying you have words that have different meanings, right?
Yes.
You also have words. You also have different words that have different meanings, but sound the same. Right. So phonetically, they're the same word. Like morning.
Phonetics, right? Yes.
And morning. Like when people say good morning, and like versus mourning a funeral or a death or a loss. You know what I mean? People would tell me, hey, good morning. And I'd be like, no. I'm never in mourning. Please don't. You know what I mean? They're like, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like, if I agree to that,
confusing. Yes.
you know what I'm saying? If I agree to that, now I'm accepting being in a state of mourning. So let's take that and apply it to your example, the specimen of life isn't fair, because we also have fair, FARE,
yes,
which now gives us so I turn my page. Fair is food provided around 1120, right? / journey. Okay. The 1120 was the year. And then that was as a noun, and as a verb at 1100. So originally it was a verb. It meant to get along or to depart, travel. So now when we say that again, life isn't fair, unless we write it down and cut it into a particular block that we're talking about. We have everything from food provided, get along, travel, departure. That was also the journey. And we have gathering to buy and sell, and pleasing to the eye. So, I mean, that kind of like, now it's, what are we doing? We got a whole 360 there.
Yeah.
So, so no matter where you're at, somebody could say that, whether you're high or low, and it could just neutralize the whole thing.
Interesting. My point in bringing that particular up on, there's the clarity of knowing what the words mean and how they're used, and that there's polarity in that as well. The other part of the reason I wanted to do this podcast is the power of suggestion and speaking things, spells that will skew the way a person thinks, will move them in a certain direction. It's like what you do with your music, you know, and we talked about this before of, you know, when an artist has a song and so when people go to watch them, they kind of get into a trance. The song kind of takes them, we talked about this, on this journey through the lyrics of what they're talking about. And you kind of align with the wording and the lyrics and what they're suggesting. And I think that is so powerful to be mindful of that in everything that's going on, especially social media and the things that they put out there. People need to understand they don't word things on accident. They word them in a certain way to make a suggestion to move you in a certain direction. And that's why I'm having this podcast, because I think it's really important for people to be really, really mindful of, you know, what they read and what there's, you know, what's being said to them, and also what they're saying themselves even. And the power of our language, the power of our words and how they're put together, and that they manifest things, that they create things. And so that's another part that I wanted to talk about today, not just the etymology, but also like the power in the use of the words, you know, intention and things like that. And I think that people don't realize that they themselves have that same power to, what's the word? Influence and affect other people by how they speak about themselves, how they speak about the world, how they speak about any topic. I don't think people realize how powerful our language is, to be mindful of that truth, I guess.
Absolutely. It's where you said it all when you were saying the power of suggestion. And then that ties into some of the core elements where we were reviewing gaslighting, you know?
Yes.
Both, and let's just for the record admit that there's a positive gaslighting and a negative. You know what I mean? Just like the infinity of everything else. You know, so that's definitely, and when you get down into some of the darkest uses for it, it's actually when we inflict it on ourselves. You know, the power of suggestion, as you said it, against how we're viewing ourselves, like we talked about with the mirror and everything.
About yourself too. Yes.
So one thing I want to add here real quick, because you brought up manifest and you know, the power to build.
Yeah, create.
The create
Outcomes.
the word is known as a construct. And what happens is it was designed and it was built with the intention stored in it. And that's where it becomes important to understand the etymology so that you can understand what you're actually doing when you use it. You know, so the construct is it's like the pile together, build up is what the verb of construct is. Okay. And that's where you get into construction is the noun. And so think about all of that energy, right?
Build.
Yeah.
Construction to build. Right. I love that.
So when we put that
Awesome.
sentence out there, if it's just more than a word, we put that sentence out there about ourselves or about others or on social media, we're piling that energy up and
Yes.
delivering it. That's why they call it email, electronic mail, or you want to just say energetic mail. You know what I mean? Because it's not physical, but you received it in writing, right?
Yeah. And that's it. And words have energy and intent behind them. And you know, when you go out and you're a motivational speaker, you're going to be very mindful of your approach, how you say things, how you word them, how you put these words together. What's the outcome that you want to have? This goes back to what we were talking about in the other podcast, which we'll be sharing this week on evoking and invoking and summoning. And words play such a huge role in that. Calling something to you, speaking creates connections. Yeah. I might be going too far deep, but you know, there's so many layers to this. So
peel, you know me, I always advise you to peel the onion back,
Love it. Yes.
It's like, for example, look, right? Because the word power means to be able. We know that already. And the word, I actually was like, you know what? I done looked up all these words and I never took the time to look up what word mean, right? So I looked up word earlier.
Oh, really? Oh, cool.
And it was originally simply speech, talk, and utterance. But what I found interesting is, of course, speech is what we think it is, and talk actually is what we think it is too. Utterance, right, had the noun form that meant speech and talk. But what I found interesting is that the adjective form of utter actually means complete / total. So now think about when you're translating, like we said, that pile up, that whole pile it all up, and you want it all complete, right? You're getting the whole thing. So if we look at it like that, this is where the original intention is important, because we're translating that whole package. So they're getting it despite what we think our intent was because of the word we're using. Our intent doesn't actually overpower the intent stored in the unit or the tool itself, you know?
Yeah. And something that you said a couple beats back about, you know, some people talk, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're communicating. A lot of people will say a lot of, let's say in the political arena, there's a lot of gibberish and talking and not really talking, but not really communicating, looking like you're saying something, but you're not really saying a whole lot. You know, that's the importance of why we're doing this, is for people to start paying attention to words, how they're being used, in what context they're being used, and your relationship with those words, your own self.
Absolutely.
Right. So I just think this is really important, because in the age of information, and we have so much being we're bombarded every day in social media with just all kinds of information. It can be just overwhelming. How do you navigate your daily life, especially now? And because of the pandemic, a lot of people are home and they're doing their business from home, and they're you know, need the internet to do their work, kind of like what we're doing here. I think it's now more important to be mindful of the power of words and how they can work in our favor and how they can work against us.
Yes, absolutely.
And when I say us, all of us, ourselves and the world, and that they help perpetuate things. They are a form of manifestation and creation. And I just think people aren't aware of just how powerfully true that is.
I I think we all have an opportunity to advance in that arena. One thing I tell people around me, like earlier on, I you know, like this right here. Let's say that it's a perfect example. We're on a two-way video meeting, right? People are dealing with this all around the world right now, and even in person. So you have one person that's like I did earlier. I started talking slightly before you were finished, right? That little overlap. Now,
That's
what was
fine.
your natural? Yeah, we hear with we understand how it happens.
Yep.
Now, what your natural reaction was like, oh, sorry, excuse me, which is I put this excuse me on there because that's my habit, right? But what I wanted to pull out was when you say sorry, right? Or a person say sorry.
That's a good one.
Sorry, if we're dealing with the law of attraction, right? I tell people, I'd be like, don't say sorry to me. Don't say sorry to me. And they'd be like, why? I'd be like, because you're not sorry.
You didn't do
Well,
any, it suggests you did something wrong.
yes. And
Yeah.
since you didn't do anything wrong, and since sorry is not really a positive word. You know what I mean? So what happens is now if we flip into the law of attraction, right? The way it works is you focus on what you want to manifest, right? Whatever we focus on, we attract, right? So now if we put out there the word sorry, we're attracting the environment to now manifest a situation where we really feel that for real. So the word
And
is
yes,
excuse me, or is excuse, which means to release of a charge.
I love it. And yeah, what ends up happening if you say that you're sorry, pretty soon people will take it like you did something to be sorry for. It suggests you should be sorry. Then
Right.
people start acting that way. And
Right.
I've noticed. So this is at the key core of why I wanted to do this podcast with you and talk about this, because this is what people don't realize they're doing and involved in the language and how powerful it is that you could just by saying one word, sorry, create a negative thing, a not so good thing for you. Abuse. It invites it to say you're sorry all the time, invites abuse, because then people will go, yeah, it is your fault. You
Right.
know what I mean? After a while, it's and it's not loving yourself if you're always apologizing, which is a thing from trauma, which many people I think this world is suffering from trauma on some level, but that is yeah, it's not a healthy way to speak about yourself.
Yeah.
It's not
Watch.
caring for yourself even.
Let me add this for you to make into the mix for you to continue that. The word sorry is an adjective from 1114 approximately, and it basically is distressed, full of sorrow. And in sorrow from 1150 is grief and emotional distress. So stress kills, you know what I
Oh
mean?
my gosh. I was just talking with my sister about this today. You know, she's like, please, you know, I'm so sorry I haven't called you. I haven't been wanting to talk to anybody. I'm like, you're doing self-care. Never apologize for that. And people understand so many, and I'm guilty of this, that if someone doesn't call you back or they don't reply in an email or any of those things, we make it about ourselves, we internalize. And you know, I just wanted to mention that because you said that, and it's the stress factor of people just constantly feeling like they have to be available for everyone, and that causes a lot of stress. But anyways, yes, stress is I'd like to know the meaning of stress, that
Okay.
word, because
Let's
it's
check it out.
huge. And it's used in many different ways in society as well, but um it's prevalent.
I agree. But yeah, to finish that thought off,
Yeah.
I I'd be like, nah, I even go as far as like I don't want an apology. Like even if you didn't use the word, so I don't care about apologies or sorry, because what I found is true is at that moment, we all meant to do what we did because or else we wouldn't have done it, right? So the after effect sorry thing is irrelevant to me. Just tell me, just tell me what your thought process was at that moment, and that might help the other person understand even better what your triggers were, you know? Stress.
Huge. That's huge what you just said. It's a very key component in actual clear communication.
Yes.
What you just said. Anyways.
And then there's some elevation above that from, I think I saw something maybe like within the last 4 years, an article that was talking about how nowadays communication is dead. Like it's old school. Nobody wants to, it doesn't even matter communication anymore. And this ties into it because what's important now is connection. Because we can communicate all day, but if nobody's connecting, all right, here we go. Stress, hardship, coercion, pressure. 1303. Now. And then it gives you some other detail about it. Hardship, coercion, and pressure.
Pressure. The breaking point. Stress creates the breaking of things. You put stress on something, you put enough pressure and stress, snap. But yes, this is so great because I think this is really good about, again, people talking and not really communicating. They're not making a connection. They're talking, right, but they're not. And we see so much in the debates when people disagree. And, you know, my partner and I were talking about this. So, they're so wanting to prove a point rather than trying to see what the perspective that person is coming from, their life perspective. Why would they would have that perspective in the first place? Mm-hmm. So it negates being able to make that connection when people are arguing and arguing a point, but the point gets in the way of the real conversation. Because I saw a quote, and I've shared it a few times, the point to any discussion is not to win, it's to gain some understanding, something to that effect. So if you're just talking, but neither of you are gaining any understanding, no wonder you're getting anywhere. You don't have a clear understanding about where the other person is coming from, why they might have that viewpoint. You're just going to have that knee-jerk reaction just because they don't agree. So you immediately shut the person down, the kibosh, instead of wanting to understand and gain clarity of why they have that position, why they have that viewpoint. So that just came to my mind when you said that. I see so much of this, and myself as well. So no judgment.
That's the Walt Disney in you. That's the magic. Now, look, right? Let me tell you how magical you are with that. Because stress, if we kept reading it, hold on, let me find it again because I changed the page. Okay, here we go. So distress. So what it said was, so remember how I said it goes on and gives you more information about it. So hardship, coercion, pressure, right? Remember the word pressure. And then it says, in part developed as a shortened form of Middle English distress, right? Now, and then it gives you some more like narrowness, oppression, et cetera, compressed. Okay, so then it goes into, so when it gets into compressed, it says past participle of stringere, which is to draw tight. The sense of great strain, anguish is first recorded probably about 1380. So like a little under 100 years after they first came up with the word, the slang became, anguish and strain. Now, the reason I wanted to point it out to you, what you were, the reason I wanted to point it out based on what you were saying is when you're talking about the disconnects, right? Remember, the pressure pushes things together. You know what I mean? Or it could divide. If it's a splitting force. So I said, well, what does distress mean? Because I just did the die, meaning not, right? So I was like, then that means that distress would be like no pressure, right? Like no stress, right? So when you look at distress, right, it says that the noun form of distress is borrowed from Old French distresse, right?
Right.
Destresse, but from Gallo Romance, right? Districtia, Districtia, which means restraint, affliction, from Latin
Affliction. Mhm.
districtus, which is a past participle of de-stringer. That's so that word that we just had, that stringier, it's now got the die in front of it, the di, which means to draw apart. And that's what you were just saying, how it draws apart, right? Because the word the dis part means apart, and the stringer, they're using it as the form of draw, tight, press together. So that division is happening.
Yeah.
And that's what you were saying in the beginning of that last segment there.
Yeah. Just again, going back to what we were talking about, where people think they're communicating, but they're really not. They're not connecting.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just a lot of misnomers in the way that we talk and the way we communicate, the way we exchange ideas and things, because these words we don't understand. We take for granted. We may even understand what the words mean, but we don't understand their power, which is why I'm having this podcast, because I ask you viewers to start really paying attention to the things that you say and what they're perpetuating in your life. Realize that so much of what we say is a creation aspect in our life. We manifest things by what we actually say. Like, I will see people say things that aren't good, and I'll be like, don't say that. Don't even put that out there. Don't. You will draw that too. You will summon that, evoke and invoke. You will align with it. And then next thing you know, you're like, what happened? That's what happened. I'm just
the
telling
spell on you.
So much of it is what you're saying and you're aligning with. When you're even engaging with people, especially when you're engaging with people in the language, there's an energy that's happening as well. And it's very important to be mindful of these things. If you really want to change your life, I highly recommend you look into this etymology, start looking up the meaning of words, start paying attention to what people say. And the creation of those things, like, again, we go back to music. When you work on a song, you want to evoke or invoke. I'm still get a little confused on those two words, but they're very similar. But it is based on that power of creation. You want to reach people. So you write the skyscraper song and you want to put words out there, create images, and get people in a certain frame of mind so they can understand what you're talking about, drawing them into your message. This is across the board. It's not just happening in songs, it's happening everywhere, basically.
Everywhere,
all the time.
You absolutely everywhere. Everything, because the world, here we go back to your statement earlier, right? And this shows how it might be right. The world isn't fair. But yet we spend so much time trying to sell everything about ourselves to each other. You know what I mean? So maybe it is a fair. You know what I'm saying? So because all that goes into your sales pitch of yourself or what you think about others. You get into a dispute with anybody, right? It could be a significant other, what have you. And for example, like a couple times, I know I sit down with somebody, they'd be like, rah, 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 rah. And I'm like, okay, cool. Tell me more about your perspective of it and everything like that. And then when they get done, they're like, okay, so what do you got to say? And I'll be like, I have to get back to you on it. And they're like, what do you mean you can't talk about it now? We want to talk about it now, right? You know, because they're ready, they're in a competitive spirit of arguing, right?
Making their point.
Yeah. And what I would rather do is, and I encourage them to even do if it's the opposite.
And myself, I identify with what you just said.
Take your time. take your time to understand or comprehend what was given to you there. You know, what did I just receive?
And how can, if you're knee jerking, and again, because these words have different meanings, it can be very easily misunderstood. You can have a misunderstanding. So true.
That's exactly why I was feeding into you saying that earlier, because the misunderstanding comes from I think we can't blame. Tell me how you feel about this. What would happen if we stop blaming, as a whole of society in the world, stop blaming the power of words, right? And start blaming the accountability factor of the user. Because
Yes.
even if we don't know what the words mean,
intention,
right? Even if we don't know what the words mean, I mean, in a general sense, like even if you don't study etymology and you're just using for the words as commonly used, if you're not clear with something, then ask a question, because you need to seek clarity. If you put something in my hand, you know, let's say you have a rod, right? And you hand it to me and I put my hand around it, it appears that I got it, right? So when you let go of it and I'm not holding it, maybe I was like close, but not there. And then it drops. Well, guess what? You thought I had it. That's the same thing with words. When you give your conversation to someone, you're doing so with the expectation that they received it. Now, what is in that expectation, I think what's underlining that expectation, if I should say it that way, is that if they didn't receive it, they would have asked you a question or asked for further clarity. And then that's where the accountability and user error comes in, because if, you know.
That's where it's so important when you say a word like toxic person.
Right.
It goes back to that, when it's left open for interpretation, it really creates so much confusion. The other part about that first statement that I started this talk with, of, you know, life isn't fair. Why would someone say that? Why would someone tell you that? Two reasons: they believe it, or they have ill intent. Because if you think, if someone's telling you life isn't fair, you know, they don't want it to be fair.
Right.
There are people that don't want life to be fair, so they'll just keep putting that out there. So, and then what happens is you have a lot of people that believe that and don't bother trying to pursue their dreams.
There you go.
To live the life they really want, because life isn't fair. Why bother? It doesn't perpetuate anything healthy. It's very harmful to me, and I don't like it. Yeah. Are there aspects to life that aren't fair? Sure, but not across the board. It's not true. Not all the time. It's just not true. And many things, if you're going to say life isn't fair, many things that aren't fair are created by humans that can be changed. We could make revisions. That's what we see right now. Like, for instance, the Kaiser Permanente employees are having a strike. So they're saying this isn't fair. And we don't want that relationship. If it's not a symbiotic and I'm not getting my needs met, that's just not going to work. I don't care if you tell me if life is fair. That's irrelevant. I'm not going to tolerate not getting paid what I should be getting paid and being honored.
So, you know, what's Kaiser? Tell me about
Oh, I just read it. The employees are striking.
Okay, the nurses.
For various different reasons. Yeah, but you know, when they do the strike, it's always, they're not getting treated right. Their needs aren't getting met. And whether life is fair or not, do you think those people are going to engage in that statement? No, I don't care if you, let's say the Kaiser says, well, life isn't fair, tough toodles. No, you want to say that so you can keep treating me poorly. And so your slogan is life isn't fair, so just, you know, suck it up. No, I don't really care. That's irrelevant. Like, I'm not going to allow myself to be treated poorly by you based on your belief that life isn't fair. I don't have that. I'm not taking that into my spirit. Thank you very much. Life being fair is irrelevant to what's happening right now. You're doing something that's harmful, and I'm not going to allow it anymore. And that's what I don't like about that statement. It does invite people to say, well, life isn't fair. You're just going to have to learn to live with it. Like I had a friend who's a nurse. She left the job because they were telling her that they weren't going to pay anybody any overtime and that they were lucky to have a job.
Mm-hmm.
We're just saying life isn't fair. Get over it.
Right.
Really? No. Whether life is
Yeah.
fair or not, and that's your idea, that's your belief, that doesn't mean carte blanche that you get to just treat me poorly. And I'm because life, you think life isn't fair, I'm supposed to go along with it. That's what I'm getting at and why I bring that statement up, because I just hear it and so much, even if they don't even say that exact sentence, the power of suggestion of, well, this is just the way life is. That's just the way it is. That song, some things can never change, Bruce Hornsby. That, oh, don't you believe them? That is one of my favorite songs because that is what he's talking about. That's just the way it is. And who are the people saying that to you? Really pay attention, people, when someone tells you that. They're either A, not pursuing their dreams, not doing what they want. They believe that. And so they're playing into that. And so if they're not successful, they heaven forbid, they don't want you to be successful either. There's a lot of that going on. Or they're the one with the power, with the money, saying, well, that's just the way it is. Life isn't fair. For who? Sure looks fair for you. You know what I mean? It's clarity. We just, these words we need to, what we're doing, revisit and look at these words and how they're formulated and what they create, basically.
I think you brought up a great point again, like you always do. Because you brought up, you said that's why we're the dynamic duo. So when you were talking about people saying it's not fair, you know what came to my mind when you were saying that? Let them eat cake.
Marie Antoinette.
And what was the success of her version of life isn't fair? When I'm gonna categorize that as the same statement, like let them eat cake, knowing that there was no nutritional value in cake, right? So life isn't fair. Here, have some cake. You know what I'm saying? Like, we know you want bread, but we're gonna give you cake. Why? Because life isn't fair. We don't give a fuck. You're gonna eat this sweet stuff and die. You know what I mean? Instead of having some nutritional value. And what was the success of that?
Well, I don't know what made me, what I think about that goes back to clear communication and perspective and what words mean to one person from that person's life experience and what it means to someone else. If you are someone that has never had adversity like Marie Antoinette, you've never had to struggle, everything was just given to you, you have a very different view on life.
Okay.
So that's why I mean, life is irrelevant. It's not even really about life. It's circumstantial. So for her, I've always looked at like, she didn't even mean anything by it. That's just from her perspective. Well, just eat cake. I don't really understand because she truly didn't understand. You can't understand something if you've had no firsthand experience with it. That's why when people have arguments, they're not asking the question of, well, why do you have this perspective? Now you're having the real conversation where the person will say, because I grew up in the ghetto. So you have one person that grew up in the ghetto and you have another person who grew up with what they say is silver spoon in your mouth. I don't like that either because it's judgmental. A person can't be blamed if they don't know any different. I feel like Marie Antoinette probably really didn't. She was young. Didn't know any different. You can't get wisdom from someone who has no reference to poverty. They don't have any connection with it. They don't have any experience with it. So how are you going to have a conversation from two different life experiences, kind of thing? That's
a great, again, I think there's absolutely potential there for powerful conversations to be coming from that separation, so to speak, of mentalities, right? As long as there's an opening for the wisdom to be received from each other. Now, one thing that you said, so I presented the the negative side because of the historical accounts of what happened, right? And then you gave a nice neutral standpoint of, well, maybe she didn't know any better. She was like, hey, we got tons of cake. Let's give them some cake. You know what I mean?
Could she?
Then to complete the infinity, right? Let's just go ahead and complete the infinity of opportunity with it. Maybe she was like, you know what? Those people don't have whatever much. They don't have the access to the life I have. You know what? We have all of this luxurious cake here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Let's share with our people. Let them partake in this luxury. And the people that are like, what? So either way, that's a great example to showcase how like the intent part doesn't matter. It's the perspective of the receiver, because 66% of what we just talked about was either neutral or positive, and they still overthrew the country. You know what I mean? So
right.
So it was 2 to 3 odds, 1 in 3 odds that it was going to be favorable, and that roll of the dice didn't go well for her. So
yeah,
I also like the thing about when you was covering the stagnation part. Either they don't want you to move up or get better, or to get out of that situation, or because where there's a will, there's a way. You see,
if they didn't, and they have a feeling about that, it's life isn't fair, they don't want anyone else to either. There's a bit of jealousy. I mean, that's why it's so hard to get ahead in life, because many people are threatened and jealous, and they don't believe they can do it, so they're not going to let you do it either. There's a lot of that going on. I don't even think that this is not judgment, people. This is all discernment. Everything we're talking about is discernment. It's not making people bad and wrong. Once again, it's just looking at these behaviors, how words play a role and help to perpetuate these behaviors, which is what is so important to me in this conversation. But yes, I have found that when people are talking about the same subject from two different life experiences, it's going to be really hard. Because if you're going to talk about, like, for instance, power companies that provide heat for people, it's going to be very different in California than it's going to be in Chicago, where they have the deadly winters. So if you're trying to talk about, we need this and we need that, well, we don't need it over here, and they don't. And so you got to get deeper, and you got to talk about why somebody needs heat and why they don't in various different situations. It's a situational thing. So, and so much of it is that, on so many levels. Like you said, people will hear a word, the same word, a different way based on their life experience. So, and that we could afford to really look into more, obviously. Here we are talking about it.
That's what we're doing here. And like people, to the viewership, absolutely, this is not a bashing of anything. I think if you've been following us, me and Trish, especially, and while we've been together and even outside, we're really keen in our own ways on covering the infinities, because what we have to consider, like we use that example, and that's what's going to really empower you, is just that moment of pause and just saying, hey, wait a minute, what's the infinity? What is the utter, the complete, the total, the totality of what they were trying to say, including their intent, including the real meaning of the word, including this, including what happened and what's going on in the background behind them that might have made them say that today and not 2 weeks ago. All of that is part of the totality, the utter understanding, so to speak, right? So when you had the power company example there, I think that's a great comparison to what you were saying earlier with the people that were quote unquote silver spoon babies and the people from the middle of the ghetto, right? Because let me go back to using the power company as an example. The power company in Chicago, you're right, in California, you're going to have that disconnect. And they're going to say, well, we don't need the heat during the winter here. And that's where I say, hey, this is the benefit or the added value of saying, you know what, let's stop for a moment, because I had the luxury of doing project management experience and process improvements. And you know what you got to do? You got to look at the whole possibility of infinity of what could be to understand what to do and what not to do. Because if you make a change today without considering this whole 50% side over here, you could find out that the change you made today solved this, but then caused 20 more problems.
Yes.
So here's what I'm getting at.
Yes.
The power company in Chicago is going to be complaining about or speaking about how they need the energy to heat in the winter. California is going to be saying, no, we don't have that issue here. However, 6 months later, Chicago's like, nah, we don't need the heat. I mean, we don't need the energy in the summer to cool. But California's in a crisis if they don't have the power surge available for all the cooling aspects they need to do in cooling their buildings in the summer. So if you're talking about energy, that's where you got to say, you know what? I just realized if you're talking to that, your person or the person that's over there with some sort of contest for you in conversation, you know what? I just realized we arguing about this, and this conversation isn't about heat. Mm-hmm. It isn't about cooling.
It's situational.
About power consumption.
And it's also situational. Everything we talk about is situational. When someone is speaking about a topic, they're speaking from their life experience.
Yes.
And again, we go back to Marie Antoinette. There's no way she could understand what the poor people are going through. She has no reference. She doesn't have any. I saw something, I might have mentioned this before with you or one of my other podcasts, but I saw something that really moved me. And it was Pamela Lee Anderson was talking on the Good Morning America or whatever, something that she did that I thought was so powerful. Every Christmas, she would take her children to go work in the food banks and giving to the needy, so that her children would understand how fortunate they were to be raised with having things, having their needs met. And really moved me to tears. I thought that was just so wonderful, because you can't explain it to a child. There's no way, but you can take them there and go, look at these children. They don't have anything. They have a very different idea about the things that they have. You're giving your child the gift of appreciation, to understand, to have clothes and food and shelter, just how important that is. You could tell them all day long, but when you take them there and they actually get to see it firsthand, you're really communicating with them in a way that's effective. You're giving them an actual firsthand example of what that is. And I would venture to say nobody did that with Marie Antoinette. They didn't do that back in the day, but it talks about the understanding part when we're having these conversations. And when people make blanket statements like life isn't fair, you really need to consider the source when people are saying anything and why they would say that. And a lot of times when you get to that, then you actually might have some understanding, and real communication can actually start to happen. If that makes any sense?
No, it totally does. And I think I'm sure everybody understands where you're at with that. And when you brought up skyscraper, right? The cool thing about that is in there. The song starts off like Motorola broke the vibe. Check the situational map. Like situational map. Check the situational map. Tap the stylus. Let's go live in the EQS. So
yes,
it's absolutely situational, and that's I think also the perspective plays a huge role, because when you mentioned how you can take the kids to see the reality, the truth, right?
Yes.
The weird part is when you study the industrialized nation, right? The cycle of industrialized countries. When a country is industrialized, they have the lowest quality of life because you have too much choice. And then you have so much pressure, right? Going back to what we talked about earlier with pressure and distress and all that stuff. You have so much pressure of, wow, did I make the right choice? Because when you went to the clothier for a pair of jeans, there's 500 different brands, 20 different styles from each brand. You know what I mean? And you're always left with, did I make the right choice? Whether it's clothes, cars, whatever. So think about the Great Depression. The reason why the community, family, and people was so tight-knit and strong back then is because you didn't have any choice.
To survive.
Right. Absolutely. You go to get a pair of jeans.
My grandmother
It was two pair of
Mhm.
jeans in your size.
You were
And they were both
right.
what, Levi's, right?
Yes.
so so
Yes.
that's all there was. So there was no wasted energy, effort, concern, distraction of poor choices. So the quality of life actually goes up. So when you said clothes, that made me think of that, because the way we in the industrialized world view people that are living what we call like tribal lifestyles, right? Is that they're really happy. Meanwhile, on average, the industrialized on average nation people is miserable, because they're just like, they're battling over the haves and have nots. And, did I even get the right phone with the, it's just, it's so.
Oh my gosh, yes. Two different situations, two different people living in different circumstances. Like, for instance, somebody shared a thing, and I think we talked about this before. It was like, you must love your mother. Your mother is your mother. I'm like, no, not if they're a pedophile and passing around from pedophile to pedophile, or they're neglectful, or, these blanket statements are very dangerous, because you're saying you have to love your mother no matter what. That's not, that's not the right idea. That's
Bam.
not always true. It's a situational thing. And so much is
Put your
this
phrase after
way.
it. Put your phrase after that. You have to love your mother, comma, life isn't fair. You know what I mean?
Now
Like, you
you're
gotta
getting
love
what
your
I'm,
mother.
and it's gaslighting. It's a form of gaslighting that
There you go.
helps perpetuate abusers.
I don't want to love
And
mom.
abusive behaviors. I don't even like to say abusers, because really anybody can change their behavior if they choose to at any given time. So that's not who you are. Like that thing we talked about. I'm insecure. No, you're not. You're feeling insecure. Never make your feelings your identity. Again, these words, what do they do? If you say them that way, you will create that truth. And you will actually believe it, because you're saying it and you're acting out of that truth and perpetuating it. So much of what we speak of in our lives, it's so important to be really, really mindful of what we're saying, and what is that getting us. Is it, I catch myself all the time saying I'm sorry a lot. That one is a big one, but I catch myself saying things all the time like, no, don't put that out there. And you are putting that out there. When you put something into the universe, you are putting it, you're aligning with it, you are connecting with it, summoning it and creating it and drawing it to you. And more like us, how do we meet? Alignment. We're both on the same page in so many areas. And hey, I get you. We saw each other and we started talking more and more, and here we are. And also how did that happen? Doing the work that we're doing, having these deep conversations, analyzing things. And it's like, oh yeah, see, she gets where I'm coming from. And then boom, here we are. Now we got this podcast and reaching out to others and hoping to create more people to get on board with us, engaging in these conversations of understanding.
Yeah. And us having the conversation invites others. I think one of the most powerful parts of what we're doing is it invites others that are watching it. Then they can go and have the conversation with those around them, and the power of suggestion spreads. And
Exactly.
So you can gaslight the gaslighter.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Gaslight the gaslight. That's a good song. You should make that a rap song.
Well, we got gaslighting, so
yeah,
that's pretty dope. But and that goes back to what you were saying with the power of the artist, which is why you don't see me doing. I would like to do we should do a song. We're gonna do a song together one day.
Yeah.
And I think that's where artists needs to hold themselves. When we go back to that word I used earlier, accountability, I think artists has to be more accountable in their product, like we thought the world isn't fair. Remember, the world isn't fair. That's the right. The product.
Yes.
So because the world, it's what you make it. And if we're putting these certain energies out there, when you get into the law of attraction, I'm talking to newer mindsets with it. And I tell them, you know, what's more powerful than your own personal focus on anything? Multiple minds focusing on it. So when we put a song out there, knowing that it's a super spell based. If regular conversation is a spell, then a song is a super spell because you have the enchantment of the musical instruments as well. So we need to be really, really all artists.
Cool word. I like that.
Thank you. All artists needs to be really particular about what they're presenting. And that's why we have the split. What's your message?
Yes.
Yeah. I'll say this and now I want to hear what you got to say about that. That's where we have the split between maybe what people consider. I'll say consider because we don't know. Public disclosure. Well, consider all the atrocities you hear about the music industry, right? Versus the independent artists. And this is why there's not that super surge of money into the independent artists as there is backing what the industry is putting out, because there could be an agenda behind it that's getting funded heavily.
That's a whole other hour.
What would be the benefit of that, right?
Right there. I have a lot to say. What would be the benefit of that?
I don't know.
Yeah.
So, you know, do you take the bag and sacrifice yourself and the people that's going to hear your music? You're sacrificing them as well, right?
Yeah.
So when you hear that age-old saying, just for a moment, to stay focused on artists of, oh, they sold their soul, so to speak, to be a part of that industry or to receive that level of success, let's say, which is disclaimer, I don't know, right? But in reality, they didn't just sell their soul, they sold their soul and everybody's soul that's going to hear that and absorb it.
This is a really interesting area. We'll go on just a little bit more and then we'll probably wrap it up because I'd like to do maybe another segment on this.
Sure.
But yeah, I think about Steven Tyler on that one. You know, people, when he came back, he got sober, the band got sober, they got back together and their songs they got a little bit more poppy, a little more slightly fluffy. People will call him a sellout and but at the same time, he laughed all the way to the bank. So this sellout thing could use a revision of what that actually is and what's the duality. Someone would call a sellout, another person would call him a successful man, a successful businessman. But so there's some misnomers in that as well, I think, because I think sometimes people, it's like, what is it? It makes me think of, you know, money is the root of all evil. It makes me think of that. But that statement has kept people poor because now they have a judgment about money. And let's get clear, it's not the money, it's what the people are doing with the money. That's the issue, not the money itself. It's just a tool. And I think that music is the same kind of thing. It's a tool. And how are you using it? And what's your intent, once again? And what's your message and where you're coming from? And, you know, so that has a lot of layers. That's an onion right there, that particular selling out. What is that exactly?
Right.
Jealous people. Well, he had the gall enough to go for his dreams. He had the gall enough to do what he wanted to do. And others that aren't doing it might say that, you know, that one is, I've been really looking at, because I've noticed, I'm like, you know, I really do think that money is the root of all evil is actually really help to keep people from having it.
It does.
Their relationship with money and success and what they're doing with their lives.
Yeah, it absolutely does. That goes into what you're talking about shaping the mindset of the people, because now that quote has helped people's perspective. So people that have the money are now evil too, right? So you look at everything they do, and then two, it create on the other side of the spectrum, it creates the cop out. Well, money's evil, so I don't need to chase it. But like you said, not that you should chase the money, but you know what I mean? Like, I don't need to feel like I could see myself being wealthy because I'm righteous. You know what I mean? It's like, what?
Thank you. Yes. And then an element of permission and worthiness. And you know, people will see successful artists and they'll say, who does she think she is? You know, well, who's
Right.
she supposed to be? You know, she's herself or he or whatever. And it's an onion. I'd like to revisit this one. I think this is a
Yeah,
really
let's
good
do
one,
it.
and it plays into, you know, why people aren't successful. It goes back to the other podcast that we talked about, the graveyard of unfulfilled dreams.
Yeah.
This plays such a big part. What we're talking about, words, manifestation, the meaning of words, and communication, and definitely in the music industry where people are writing songs and that kind of thing. So I don't want to get too far away, but I think you know what I mean.
I think you're not far away at all. I think you're absolutely right in line with it, because even that there's forks in the road of, I would probably be safe to say, even of all the artists that people are going to say, oh, they sold out, they're doing this stuff and they're crazy and they're part of this group. And I really don't think there's a large percentage of them that knew what they were getting into when they got into it. You could be really just a great songwriter or have a buzz, and you're thinking you're elevating your career. You get to this point, and they pass you this contract and you sign the contract.
Oh, that's
Now they
so
have
much
control.
more the truth. Tom Petty, we'll talk about this. I like this. We'll talk about Tom Petty's story, and what he did was just, you know, yeah. But this all goes into, you know, your relationship with money and your belief about money and what we're told. You know, life isn't fair is
Mhm.
huge. It just plays such a big role in so many things, and whether people are successful and what success is, even, you know,
Right.
to me, if you're pursuing your dreams, wherever, whatever level you're at, you're successful.
Right.
Success doesn't come from someone else, it comes from yourself and what you feel. If you're happy doing what you're doing, what could be more successful than that?
Yeah.
You know, money is just, it's the icing, it's not the cake. You know, that's what we're getting at here. The cake
Right.
and icing is the difference. So, but yeah, my mind gets going on this stuff and I could just go for hours. But
It's
I would
cool.
really like to do another segment on this because we're coming up, we're probably over. We're almost an hour and a half, which is fine. I try to keep it in increments, you know, to keep people, because now everybody's attention span, you know, it's with TikTok and everything else. I'm just trying to
How you
keep
feel
it.
about that?
The TikTok thing, yeah, I think it's great. I think it's amazing. I've seen powerful videos come out of TikTok.
Mhm.
Seriously, boom. I saw one girl that was talking about what happened to the indigenous children in the you know, Catholic schools, religious schools and whatnot.
Mhm.
And oh my gosh, I mean, she just really put it out there. Boom. Just called it out. And she's a really beautiful girl. She used her beauty to get it the attention and get people to her. She had like 1 million views, but she was
Mhm.
talking the real deal, addressing really important truths of what happened, what has been happening, what's continuing to happen there. So again, TikTok is a tool. It can be used for the sex
Mhm.
maniacs and naked people and people doing all crazy shenanigans. And they're really important people. No, I don't want to, no, let me rephrase it. The other people that are activists like us, there's no more important than the other. It's all relative. It's all important. You know, some people, they're goofy and some people are serious, but I think that TikTok is powerful. But like anything, balance. When
Right.
things get out of balance, then we have to like revise things and um, revisit things. And that's what we're doing here today. We're like,
I I wanted to. 'Cause I was saying that because I wanted to showcase that I'm a fan of length. You know what I mean? Um, like granted, we may go 2-3 hours sometimes, but it's not like we're sitting here like we're you're engaged for that whole 2 or 3 hours with, and it's showing you and opening you up to more than you came with. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's important if we're going
absolutely.
to exercise our attention spans in
Hmm.
in in as a counteraction from the attack to shorten them. because we know the effect of shortening the attention spans means that this is why they're doing it, so that these type of conversations can't be had because they're in depth. What's the word? Utter. We don't want any true utterances.
Except what's happening is what with this girl, and I'm gonna see if I can find it, is she's like literally was, talking about, oh, you had to assimilate them. What does assimilation mean? Genocide? Could it mean genocide? But I digress. That's how she was talking. And it was just quick, boom, 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 man. I like both of them. I like to do both. The lengthy ones and the short I would like to make some clips so that we pull people in of some of our most powerful points in our podcast. Let's use all of it. It's a tool, right? Like people complain about Facebook. I would be sitting here right now if it wasn't for Facebook. I would have met you and so many wonderful people that have like greatly impacted my life. So, for me, I'm grateful. I thank the universe every day for Facebook, for TikTok, and we can like boom and talk to somebody in Zimbabwe. You know what I mean? I have friends all over the world that communicate with me, tell me what's going on where they are. I mean, that's just like, think of when we were in high school. Could you imagine?
Right.
Where our careers would be, our music careers, like, I mean, it would have been a totally different deal. So it's a blessing and a curse, which you said the other day, which I really love, the duality of things and being mindful of that, and working with that principle in every way.
Yeah, I think you said it. I think you hit it right on the head when you said put a clip out there to bring them in, because when we get into these quantum physics stuff, like
fishing, bait.
And that's the thing. Look at what you're saying. Yeah. So now look at what you're saying you want to do. You're going to put, and I know this is marketing, and I know this is what we got to do because the attention span and all this stuff, we got to get their interest peaked so they'll commit to viewing the longer format. But that's why I'm saying this, because now look at the extra work that needs to be done to get their attention so that they can come and be attentive. Like, that's like, what? But if you put the football, if you put the game on, they can sit there for hours. If you put Jeopardy on, they'll sit there for an hour. If you put on, Days of Our Lives, they sit there for an hour, right? Whatever it is to that person, they'll sit there for hours. No worries.
Binge watching too. Yeah.
But then you give them something that is meaning. I'm not saying they don't have anything they learn or gain from watching these like TV shows and stuff, but they don't have any complaints sitting there and applying themselves to that full time. So I think it's part of the screening process. Like in reality, Trish, the stuff you're talking about, I know you're like me and it took you 20 years to get to this point with it. You know what I mean? So the fact
I've always been this way.
Right.
That's why I got the nickname Patty the Weirdo, because I was always wanting to engage and what, but why? I always had questions like, but why? Just quit, just get out of here, kid. You bother me. So and other people were like, you're weird, so
I can relate. I embraced the weirdo factor, you know what I mean? And I was actually like, hey, who are you? I'm the weirdo. You know what I mean? Like, don't worry, I'm tell you.
I'm the weirdo.
So the fact that they can get this in utterance, right, in its complete totality in an hour, in 2 hours, in 3 hours, right? It's compiled of 20 years and 30 years of experience. So there's an opportunity for them to be grateful. And that's who our core audiences are. They're the ones that recognize the value. If this was a college course, they'd be paying us what, $10,000 a year for us to have this conversation in front of them, some chalkboard that we can't reach the whole thing because it's one of them big chalkboards like in universities and stuff. You gotta slide down. What's the difference? And that's where it's so not only does the words, that's where you get that value. What does value translate to the other person? Do they respect the fact that you spent your whole life being who you are so that you can be in a position now today to have this conversation so that they can benefit and invest in their people around them, And I kind of feel like, to a degree, that if that's not them today, then okay, it may be them next week, next month.
Yeah. I think what's the most powerful thing are the questions.
Mm-hmm.
Put the questions on the table, and then we can really have some in-depth conversations. And that's what we're doing. We're putting some questions out there about, if you know, when people say life is what you make it. We'll close the show on this. Life is what you make it. Well, but they never told us what that means and how to, well, if it's what you make it, what do you mean? Someone that's in a situation where they're being abused is going to be like, I'm not making this. You know, that's a blanket statement that doesn't have any clarity. People, what does that look like? It's not an action. It's not descript. So let's do the next podcast opening up with that. Life is what you make it. And
Okay.
what does that mean? What does it look like to create the life you want? How do you get there? You know,
So
how do you make it what you want it to be?
So I'm gonna end it with this, right? From my perspective of what you're saying there. To me, those are the same exact statements. Life is what you make it, and life isn't fair. Because like you said, it's all about what you make it. So to flip that
Yes.
into how it's the same thing as life isn't fair, you could be like, yeah, you're right. Life isn't fair. I had to go through all this schooling, learning. I had to pull 20-hour days because I went to work. I came home. I studied on YouTube because I couldn't afford college and nobody gave me a scholarship. And I did it. And this list be a mile long. And I made it. And this is my company. And now I'm doing this. You see what I'm saying? So they can use that life isn't fair statement as justification
As
of their
fuel.
value. Right.
Yeah.
Their value.
Some people, it'll put a fire under the belly. Really? What? Oh, I'm not going to buy into that. So yes. But the great thing about this is we're going to help people understand that they have a lot more power than they're even remotely aware of. And that's what we're after here. Empowering people. That's the goal here.
That is it.
Through understanding these truths and finishing the sentences to these blanket statements.
Excuse me.
And then we can really get somewhere.
Exactly. The power means to be able. So.
Yes. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Trish.
Thank you, Pasha. I love it. And yeah, well, if you're open to doing another one, we'll pick up where we left off on that closing note of life is what you make it. And I think that's going to be powerful and tie in a lot of the stuff we're talking about here and how it applies to that statement.
Yeah. I'm all for it. You know, I'm all for it. Let's keep them coming.
Okay.
And let's keep helping the community the best we can. Okay.
That's right. I love it. Thank you so much, Pasha. It's always a pleasure. What's your, I don't get the wording right. Every day is.
It's always a perfect day.
It's always a perfect day. Love that. Love that. Let's run with that. And until next time, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. And next time, Pasha, I'm looking forward to it.
Me too.
All right.
Thank you. Enjoy.
Thank you. You too.